You're listening to the 4-Phase Cycle podcast with your hosts, Dr. Alex and Megan of ZESTY Ginger. If you're looking to naturally balance hormones and learn how to work with your body instead of against it, you've definitely come to the right place. As a duo of an integrative MD and a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and best friends, we use the 4 phases of the female cycle in combination with functional lab work and mindset practices to transform the lives of the women we work with.
We also have a whole lot of fun along the way. If you're new around here, it's best to start with season 1 before jumping around and plan to roll up your sleeves. Showing up for ourselves and enjoying our lives is what good health is all about. Just a quick reminder though, this information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor before making changes. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 4-Phase Cycle podcast. And today I have Julie Reisler with me. Hi, Julie.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
So happy to have you here. This is going to be a great conversation. We've been chit-chatting already. So Julie Reisler is a founder and CEO of Empowered Living, is a master transformational coach, Bestselling author, TEDx speaker, and podcast host of the You-est You. I love it. Julie has been in Mind, Body, Green, the Chopra Center, and Throwable, and is the author of the Get a PhD in You book series. She's a multi-time and teacher on the popular app Insight Timer with over 150,000 downloads. Julie is also the founder of the Life Designer Coaching Certification Academy and Sacredology community. Julie has a master's degree in health and wellness coaching and is on the faculty at Georgetown University in their coaching program. She loves guiding big-hearted spiritual entrepreneurs to be their You-est You in their careers and life. So to learn more, and we'll get way into it, but go check out Julie on juliereisler.com. Yay, Julie. So excited.
Thank you. It's always funky to hear your own bio. I'm like,
your own bio, right?
Get to the convo. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's an honor. So I love the title, the You-est You. I just love that whole concept. And I would love to hear from you. Where did that start? What did it come from?
Yeah, I'm like, okay, how much time do we have? I think, look, what I'll say is this. Thank you. I, first of all, love making up words. And I also did quite a bit of time in life where I really was not feeling so grounded or connected to my own self, my own voice. It might be, those might relate to terms like people pleasing. And, it's kind of funny to say wearing a mask these days because we wear masks sometimes, but wearing that proverbial mask of kind of trying to be just who I thought I needed to be depending on the situation. It was just, for me, there was a lot of time of not being what I'd call me-est me. And once I started to do a lot of deep dive work into really unpacking, and I would say excavating myself and like really looking at, who, like that age old question, like, who am I really? And what am I here for? And what am I really purposeful about? I did a lot of work. I can talk more about that later, but through coaching and support groups and all kinds of modalities, coaching really made a huge difference though. And I really got clear, I've got to be, we have a certain amount of time here on this planet. Like I want to really tap into the gifts, the unique, divinity in me, as we all have that. And that led to a whole 180 in my life in every area. And when I was, early on putting who am I? What's my business? What's the point? Like, what am I doing here? Gratefully, there's a lot of coaches, which is great. But I remember I was working with two friends of mine who helped me with my website and branding. We were talking about it. I'm like, I just want people, I want you to really feel what matters to me is being like the most you, like the just You-est You. Like we both were like, three of us were like, oh my gosh. What's so funny is I did not know this, but in Dr. Seuss, one of his books, he talks about no one is more youer than you. Like, and then I'm like, oh crap, it's different and it's all good. But I was like, I love that maybe somehow the spirit of Dr. Seuss might have come in and inspired that conversation. And it just, to me, it's like that idea, right? There's just that authenticity, that connection, that deep alignment with who you are, that evolution, that genuine place of not trying to be somebody else, but just trying to be and trying to be connecting to your highest self, your higher self. So came from that conversation, and it was one of those light bulb moments. We were all like, that's it. And I was like, all right, I'm going with it. I'm going to make up the name. I'm going to go with the made up name. And people either get it or not. And most get it. But that's the origin story. It's how it was birthed.
I love it. And at that point, did you feel like you were really being you?
Yeah. So, the process, I'm really open about this. I talk about struggling with food addiction and sugar addiction and for a long part of my life, and getting into getting help for that and support started about 20 years ago. And that kicked off this entire process. But it was really, by the time I came up with that, it's an evolution. It's not like every single day, I'm waking up like, all right, like I am just like on 4 cylinders, but I will say I do feel like I am connected to my higher self as much as I can. And I try to keep that in the forefront of what's important to me, because I also believe we all are able to show up and connect and be vulnerable and serve and have real relationships when I'm in that space of being my me, or you being your You-est You, that's where we start to connect on a human level that I think our planet is like desperately seeking and asking for right now.
Absolutely. I think more people being open and vulnerable. So I love that you're willing to kind of share that story. Can you take us back to when you were in that space of disordered eating, or what that looked like?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's important to say is I think, we all have different ways of handling stress and emotions. And for me, growing up in a family, I grew up outside of Boston, very affluent area. Very loving parents. My dad had undiagnosed PTSD. He's a Vietnam veteran, and undiagnosed bipolar and depression. I mean, it was like a shitstorm. It was really quite challenging. He was extremely loving and like awesome dad, just struggled. And it wreaked havoc on his finances and my parents, and just a lot of stress and financially, and then a lot of stress. Ironically, he was a financial planner and had his own business and like really struggled. And that struggle, that was quite traumatic, even though they were very loving. I grew up in a very, very affluent area where, most people had 2 and 3 homes. And there were times my parents almost had to, foreclose on our home. And I think dealing with that stress and that anxiety, and I could, and I talk about this, I'm an empath, I'm sensitive, and I picked up on his depression, and it wasn't talked about at all. And it just a lot of that weight, I didn't know how to handle it. And, food was like the currency of love in my household. Aside from, it was a lot of like saying, I love you, but food was kind of that, it's more than it just tasted good. Like my friends would joke when they came for dinner, there was like enough lasagna for like 50 people, and there'd be like 4 of us or 5 of us. So my dad, I think, wasn't super, pricey necessarily, and he could shower us and share his love with food. And so, that became how I dealt with feelings and didn't deal with feelings. And really then started to, I think, once we got into junior high school, and just felt stress with doing well in school, and all kinds of stuff. And I didn't know how to handle those emotions. I love my parents. They did not teach me how to handle emotions, and I ate over them. So binging, especially sugar. I have my quick story. You might appreciate this. I was on the ski team because the reason was we got to sell M&Ms. We had to, and I literally ate like it was a case of them. If this old school, like the box of M&Ms that you'd sell for like the ski team or the swim team, I ate the entire case of them and had to somehow find money for it. It was awful. And I had like babysitting. I refereed soccer games. I like figured it out, but I mean, I got so sick, and I just remember, wow, okay, that's like, I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop eating them. And so that carried on and off through college afterwards. And it wasn't until, I was in a job I did not love early in my 20s. I was newly married. I was just miserable, but you wouldn't know it. I certainly didn't wear that on my face, but I felt it. And yeah, there was a day where I knew about a support group, and I had the information, and I was thinking about going. And at the same time, I remember driving again, hand in M&Ms, something about M&Ms. And I just, like, for a moment, really considered driving the car into a tree, to be very honest with you. It was that much despair. And I remember that was the beginning of tuning in. I heard a voice say, like, if you go to this support group meeting, your life will change for the better. Thank God I listened to it, and not comfortable to go, but that changed everything. There's been a lot of recovery and unpacking, and a lot of inner work since 2003. That was when I found that meeting. So listening to my intuition, that's a big thing it's what I teach. It's what I believe in, and it saved my life many times.
Wow. Julie, you had mentioned, I believe in your TED talk, you had said that it had gotten to the point that you were eating out of the trash.
Oh yeah.
And I have to ask what that looked like. Like, my friend said, well, I used to pretend to throw away food and then go get it. What were you doing eating out of the trash?
Yeah. So this is and let me say this, right? There's like eating out of the trash. Like, I'm walking by, a fast food restaurant, I pull shit out. And no, thankfully I'm not homeless. I wasn't pulling out the trash that way. However, let me not like sugarcoat this, pun intended, not intended. I worked ironically for a big food company, very well-known one. And for Panera, for people that have heard of it. And I was in their largest franchise, and there would be, when I was in the store, they would throw away cookies sometimes that either that were overbaked. So like pulling it out there. Once I got to my office though, it was amazing and also horrible. Like, it was basically in the basement of this, where we worked, was like a mini cafe. So you had like people would bring in muffins and cookies like from the stores. It's a nightmare. It was a nightmare. Plus the espresso machine, that was great. But like, I would all the time, oh my gosh, trays of cookies, of bagels, they'd be thrown away. And I would go and pick them up the top and, bring them upstairs. Or my own trash, I would try to eat half and then throw it away and then eat it out of the trash. So, any way you look at it, I was definitely pulling food out of the trash. And that to me, that is not loving. That's not, now I don't want to be crappy if anyone's doing that, to be compassionate with yourself, but I don't want to be eating out of the trash these days. That doesn't work for me. Yeah.
It was a sign, for sure, a sign.
It was a sign. Something was up. Yeah. Totally.
Thank you for sharing. I just had to know more about that.
Yeah.
And I also, Julie, I know you've mentioned that people who are empaths often struggle with food. What have you found around that? And I know, and also mention your family and your dad. Do you feel that if someone had acknowledged the emotions that were there, that you knew you were feeling, would that have allowed you to process? Was it the fact that people acted like they weren't there that was the most harming? How do you feel that all intertwined, the emotional piece, the empath piece, and the food?
Yeah. I think to the family and then the empath piece, I think honestly what was happening is I could sense my dad's sadness and lack of worthiness in his own stuff so deeply. And the last thing, I just did not want to see my father like crumble. And, I was really scared, honestly, at a deep, deep level, that he was not okay. He was going to take his life. Really kind of deep stuff. And so I couldn't even address that. I remember I wrote in my journal at an early age. I loved keeping a journal. And I remember writing, I was like really mad at my mom about something. And the only way I knew to handle that, like she would, I was yelling. I just didn't have the tools. My dad, I was upset about something. And I remember writing this, like, I don't know how to be upset with my dad. I couldn't even express it. Like I literally couldn't, I didn't have the tools to do it. And I didn't see that it was safe and that he was going to be okay. I think my mom did her best, but I don't think she knew how to hold that space of like, let's talk about the feelings. It is okay. Like, you're allowed to be angry, like process them through. So they got stopped, or they just weren't, they really were not talked about, like the stress and the angst that was in my household a lot. My dad was in and out of work a lot. And I mean, granted, we were lucky. I had a grandmother on the other side who was basically saved us every time, but it was very, it was disconcerting and stressful. And I didn't want to add to that. So that's where you start getting that codependency and the people pleasing. I just really didn't know how to manage my emotions. And I was scared I was going to like somehow hurt him. Um, and I think being an empath, this is what I've studied this, I've observed it. I think a lot of times if you're an empath, meaning you feel everything at a very deep level, often with the five senses, and in addition to that sixth sense, like knowing something without knowing why you know it. I could feel his sadness. I could feel, it's like the words would often feel like they were a bubble above his head. As empaths, I think oftentimes food and overeating and even sometimes extra weight. And there's no judgment if you have extra weight. I've had extra weight. It's not that, it's just, it can add to this feeling of safety and protection. And so if, you're someone who's struggled with being really highly in tune and empathic, there were times I can tell you at a very deep level, it felt safer. Just the food and overeating made me feel more solid and stable and safe. Now, that is not the best way to find safety and stability. And for anyone into like the chakras, it's really, we're talking that root. Like, I did not feel, stable and grounded at that very basic root level. And food certainly can give you that feeling. It's comforting. There's, you get the chemicals like dopamine and other feel good chemicals when you eat sugar. It's only lasts for like a minute or two, but so I think that having that safety, sometimes wearing that can make you feel safer in the world. And I've heard this, I've read this. I know Dr. Judith Orloff, who's this, expert in being an empath. I remember her studies just really talking about this. So it's very common. Other addiction also, but food is often very connected with being an empath, overeating, using food, abusing food. And again, it just thwarts any emotion. If you're feeling a lot coming in all the time, it kind of cuts it off and cuts it down. And so I have to watch out today. I can sense people and energy and light, like all of it all the time. And, that's a whole different conversation, but I'm very conscious because what I try not to do is, I try to eat food to be healthy and nourished, but not as a way to block anything.
I can see that being totally connected when you're feeling that much, right? And you're just, especially in an environment maybe where you don't feel safe and you're feeling all the feels and then looking for something to comfort you. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Okay, so now you said you found support group for food, and like at what point then did you lean into knowing, I mean, you've created coaching certifications and podcasts and you've written books and you speak, like you do and have participated in a lot of things. When did you know, like what part of the path led to you creating all of that?
Yeah, it's so funny when you say that. I'm like, really? I did? Because this has not been a linear journey. And I'm curious, like, I don't know about you or others listening in, like, this has not been linear. And I'll say that, that voice that said, Julie, if you get to a meeting, like your whole life will change. It did. And not all in the easiest ways, right? Like the more I started excavating my meest me, right? I got this realization. I had two kids under the age of 2, and I realized I was married to a really good person, but it was not the right fit. It is not the best time to end a marriage when your kids are like both kind of in diapers. It was a nightmare. Yet I felt very aligned with that. And we've done a really good job. Now I am remarried, as is he. But that was intense. And, going, realizing I didn't want to stay in a corporate day job that paid well and good benefits. It paid okay, but it paid, it was stability. for me, it was really when I went back to school and I got this, my master's degree in health and wellness coaching. And while I was there, this is so crazy. While I was there learning about, from an integrative approach, epigenetics, neuroplasticity, how we process stress, autoimmune, how to eat, all of that. That is when I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, which is a underactive thyroid issue. I try not to say illness issue that is autoimmune based. And I remember talking to this professor I had, and I was like, well, I eat this and I do this. Isn't that healthy? And she's like, oh, girl, we need to sit down. No, like, hold on. It was like that program saved my life. It's when I got into meditation, and everything just added into deeper kind of self-care and getting a better sense of who I am and ways that I can be my best. And it didn't happen in a linear place. I started my company about 8 years ago and heard that I needed to write a book from that inner voice. And I've learned that when I hear that, it's like, I'm not going to not listen anymore. I've done life not listening, and it is kind of shitty. Doesn't work. So the book, and I mean, I don't know what to say. I know people talk about downloads. Honestly, I sat down every morning. I imagine speaking to my younger self. I wrote the book by hand, literally, and just it poured out of me. And in that was a lot to do around, health and well-being from an integrative approach, as well as coaching. And that led to my TED Talk and led to like opening doors for other things. But, the coach certification program, that was one of the gifts of the pandemic. I woke up, and when I hear that voice and I know it was like, you must do this now. Very calmly, very kind. I mean, I could have said no, but I knew. I was like, oh crap, kept coming back. And I'm like, okay. And I took the work that I did in my degree and at Georgetown and my own experience. And I'm like, I want to teach this from a place of honoring intuition, heart intelligence, as well as some of the other modalities. And so it's not been, sequential, even though it might sound it now. It's kind of, at times I'm like, wow, that was kind of backwards. But I do think when we're tuned in, and by the way, when I'm listening, when I'm nourishing myself in a way that's best for my body, that is when my connection to my me, my higher self is clear. And I choose to follow that. My motto is, the divine is my employer. That's kind of how I do things. That was a long-winded answer.
I love the divine as your employer. I would love a little more specific. Is the voice actually something you hear in your head? Is it just all of a sudden you see words? Is it a sense? How do you experience that knowing?
Yeah. And here's the thing, we all have an inner knowing, right? For some, it's a gut feeling. For some, it's different for all of us, I think, in different ways. Mine is actually multifaceted. It's not always the same. I typically hear it's audible, it's audio, I'll hear the words. It's like it's being spoken through me, as me, yet it has a quality that's very calm, very the cadence is different. Like when I'm in fear, I can tell the difference of that voice. That is not necessarily feels like an intuitive nudge. That feels usually frantic. This voice that I hear, I hear like a sentence or a command, so to speak, and it's just very grounded, very calm. There's just a truth to it. Sometimes I'll get visions. Sometimes I'll get an image of something. That's happened quite a bit. I get an image of like the book. I had an image of the book. And I've also got, I'll get chills or gut feeling or what I call heart flares, where your heart's like, yes. But I would say the audio, hearing it, that is typically, that's probably the dominant one for me.
Do you help your students, Julie, figure out that difference between that intuitive hit and fear? Because I know that's something the women we work with are always working to improve. If you have any tips there, we would love that.
Oh, yeah. And I do have a assessment that tells you what your dominant intuitive type is.
Cool.
But I think but what you're saying, this is important. This is really important, is deciphering that voice of fear versus intuition versus inner guidance. And the first thing is, I kind of alluded it to before, is you want to notice like the cadence, the the frequency of energy, meaning the pacing, like, are you hearing this in a way that, or sensing it or feeling it in a way that feels like, does it make you more anxious? Does it make your heart beat? Does it feel frantic? Does it, maybe it's a sense of impulsivity. What I have found is that inner guidance that is kind of that true higher intelligence guidance feels like the truth. It feels calm. It feels often quiet. There's not a lot of words, which is very cool for somebody like me who's super verbal, verbose. It's usually succinct. And the other thing to do is, if you want to use your body wisdom, is number one, you could do something. I do use pendulums, could use that. But I also would say a very quick way is just notice, like, are you literally leaning in or are you leaning away? Your body will not lie. So if it's something, notice if it's something that comes through to you and you're kind of leaning towards it, notice that, versus even if you're not physically moving away, but you feel that, like, even that big, deep, shallow breath. So noticing your breath, your energy, your body movement. I mean, it's interesting. There's so many, it's multifaceted. I mean, we're obviously dimensional beings. And so there's a lot to tap into. But just notice how you feel after you get that knowing. That will give you a lot of information. And the other thing you can do is to journal and do, intuitive journaling is what I call it. And there's a couple ways to do it, but one might be asking a broader question, taking a pause, breathing, and just writing whatever comes up. And kind of like that automatic writing where you don't edit it, and just notice, like, you'll start to see, oh, okay, this is just fear. Oh, this feels right. And then notice how you feel after you hear it or see it or read it or sense it. Like when I heard, just go to this meeting and your whole life will change, I wasn't excited to go at all, to be honest. But the feeling I had was, oh, that's true.
So there was a feeling with that one.
Yeah.
Truth. I love it.
Yeah. Everyone knows, we all know our truth. I really believe that. And I think that is connected to being your You-est You. It's also, you choose. Do you want to follow it? Do you not? You have a choice.
How do you get past fear, Julie, when you're going to do something like write a book or a TED talk? Like what drives you forward past that?
It's really, really interesting. And I'll be I'm always very honest, but I'll say this, that my fears, I think, actually aren't often, they come up for sure with doing things like writing a book and getting on stages, for sure. And when I've had that kind of fear, what helps me right away is just get into my why, and the purpose, and what the heck am I doing here anyhow? And just that kind of is that, like, chiropractic realignment. I also think help going to the spiritual realm of, all right, the divine is my employer. I wouldn't have been giving this option or opportunity or thought if that wasn't part of a greater plan. I'll say honestly, for me, where I tend to struggle with fear more is just around health and well-being. Like, am I taking care of myself in the right way? Am I doing everything I can do? I have to really watch where it shows up there. And so for that, I have people and a team that supports me, including my own coach. But, compassion, the girl that did not, I try to be loving and give myself space to feel what I'm feeling, which can feel sometimes scary when it's, especially during a pandemic. There's been a lot of fear. Maybe others don't have that fear. I have definitely felt it in different ways. Just try to be curious and really kind to myself. I think kindness, compassion, I'm not willing to be shitty anymore to myself. I've done enough of that, and it doesn't work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I heard you mention, Julie, that you found that your struggle with your thyroid and Hashimoto's, that it was connected to your voice. So what did you discover? What were you not saying, or what were you not sharing? And then when you figured that out, how did that shift your message or how you were speaking?
Yeah. This was like one of those really powerful light bulb moments for me. I've had a few, and I'll tell you, this felt like it came out of left field. I had just moved out, was separated. In fact, I was with my boyfriend, who's now my husband at the time. We were away. And the next thing I knew, I was like with EMT around me at a Target in West Palm Beach. Like, it was not what I was expecting for a vacation. They could not figure out what was wrong with me. I was had a very, very low pulse. I had been really tired, hot night, sweats. I did not know what was going on. And once I got back, went to a specialist, had to go to the hospital. And I just remember the minute I heard what it was, my inner voice said, that is your throat chakra. That is you not speaking your voice. So, I was in a marriage, and I don't blame my former husband. I set up that relationship, but it was certainly one where it occurred to me as being a bit controlling. And I did not feel comfortable speaking my voice. I was also, how do I say this? I consider myself more of a spiritual being in a body, not necessarily a religion per se. And I was with someone with a little bit more of a connection to certain rules and regulations of that religion. And it wasn't bad. It just wasn't me. And I think I didn't feel comfortable speaking up, or I didn't feel like I was going to still be liked and still be accepted. And it's not that anyone said that, or probably wouldn't have, but that's on me. But I certainly did a lot of time where I didn't speak up. And it just, year after year, that really, I think, made a big impact. And I think, affected my body. I really feel it's connected to speaking out, which is probably why I'm so passionate about speaking, writing, because I just, it's healing. And I also feel like we all have stories and things to share. Everyone does. And yeah, it was it's funny that the color associated with that area is blue. So it's funny. I looked and I was like, wow, I've been wearing blue the whole year. I wonder if that was like an unconscious something to try to heal myself. But for about a year after, I literally like only wore blue. That's why I do bring in blue a lot. I think it just is healing for me. It really is.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I know it's really powerful when we can see what different parts of our body are telling us on the emotional level, right? Or the energetic level, as well as physically what we can do to support it. So I know usually when people can make that connection, right? Like, oh, is there something I'm not speaking up about? It can be really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say notice just like your inner voice, like notice if there's a part of you that feels a little out of balance, or exactly like if you're not speaking up. I know a lot of women struggle with thyroid issues, as you know. I really believe it's super connected to speaking up and out, being empowered, speaking your voice. I think there's a real connection with emotions. Yeah, pay attention.
What's your advice for people starting to speak up in a way? I feel often, have you noticed this where it's like, say nothing, say nothing, say nothing, and then kind of comes out in an explosive way versus like, I'm owning it. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like this.
Yeah. Well, I was kind of raised in this support group kind of style where it's like, you own your shit. Like you just, here's what, like I even talking before, it's the thing I would say is, remember, we're all creators of our life. You don't want to be crappy to yourself about it, but there's, an aspect, to be compassionate about towards yourself. If you did not speak up for a long time, what I think I've seen is what you said, where it's like, I feel free and I'm just going to spew. And like, that can happen. I would just, I love the phrase pause, or when in doubt, don't. Like if you're new to speaking up and speaking out, maybe like take a breath, take a pause, really feel into how is this going to land on somebody else? And is this fully coming from my heart, or is this coming from resentment? I have done a lot of work around resentment and, looking at inventories around resentment. And I can say that what I try to do is do that kind of work solo and like on the side. And what I try to speak about is the healed and healthy version of that. So, what I've heard said is like, don't bring the mess to the masses, bring the message. Leave the mess. Like, you can talk about the mess, or I've heard the, share about your scars, not your wounds. Like, there's a way of speaking about going through challenges without like actually bashing people. I don't believe in that. And yeah, this is where getting support, coaches, therapy, like get support so you can do the work so that you're not spewing. You want to be sharing is probably the best way to say it.
Mm. And you talk about getting a PhD in you. I love that. And right, if we spend so much time just figuring out all these subjects and these other things, and in school and college, there was no looking back at us. There just was no part of that, or we're figuring out us, unless we were doing it on our own. So talk about the idea of getting a PhD in you.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, this idea came to me. It was like, maybe 7 years ago. I was at I'm a junkie for support groups, for any kind of support. And I was in a support meeting with another friend, and I walked out and I had spent hundreds of hours like doing this work, working with a coach, doing this inner journeying. And I said to her, I was like, holy crap, I actually feel lighter and freer than I've ever felt. I said, I feel like I just did like a 10-year PhD in myself. And I'm like, something about that stuck. And when I was writing my book, and even though I'm like, who the hell am I to write a book? I did go through that. It finally occurred to me, that name dropped in. And I was like, oh my God, that's what I just did. And we study everything. We don't study ourselves the way we would study. You go back to school for business or biochem or art history or psych. But do you study yourself that way? Not really, not typically. And it was like this like opening of the heavens. I'm like, that is what I want to help people to do, is to feel like you deserve to study and to know and be aware and love and honor yourself the same way as if you went through, a graduate program. So, when I wrote the first book I wrote it's really comprehensive. It goes through like a lot. I mean, basically my journey in a way that helps you to look at, what are the things you want to let go of, those stories, beliefs, that aspect, but who are you? What's really important to you? What are you here to do? What lights you up? And it does look at nourishment and how you're taking care of yourself or not. And the goal is to come out of it. What I've heard from people that have done it is, it's no joke. You definitely there's a lot of activities and questions. I mean, I poured myself into it. But I just believe we are worthy of investing that time and energy and study of ourselves, just the way you would for a college degree or, master's or a PhD. And the truth is, the more you have awareness, the higher your awareness or consciousness is, especially about yourself, well, you're the person you're going to live with the rest of your life, so it is, to me, it's priceless.
What could be one step, Julie? I know it's going to be a whole process of studying yourself. I've been doing mine for, at least 10 years, probably 40. But what could be a step someone could get started who wants to look at themselves in this holistic way?
So I usually, the first thing I think can be very helpful, and this does take like a little bit of extra focus, but you got to start noticing, what are you saying to yourself? Because, I know we know this, there's something like 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day that our brain just naturally has. Many of those are like throwaway thoughts and comments that we're saying to ourselves that are pretty shitty. So here's a great way to see it. Get up in the morning, when you go brush your teeth, just notice, when you look at yourself, what are you saying? What are you saying when you go to the bathroom? What are you saying when you get up and look in the mirror there? What are you saying when you get your breakfast together? Get your note thing out on your phone and just start writing. Just start observing and writing that inner dialogue down. If you could do this, I mean, a week is great. If you could just even do a day or two, what you'll start to see is, oh my God, what the heck? I mean, I remember doing this and I was like, this is awful. Like, I would never say this to anybody. it was helpful because I got to see it not from condemning, but from curiosity. So looking at yourself and really getting that, that sense of what you're saying. The other thing I'm sure you're into it's changed my life. Any kind of meditation and mindfulness is crucial because it's going to help you to tamper the stress response, to slow down. Frankly, for me, it's helped slow down, I don't know, my brain, my processing. It's allowed me to be less in the reactive state, more in that place of responding versus reacting. And it can help to give you that greater space between stimulus response, between a thing happening and responding. So that would be like, I feel like we should all be meditating. I think this planet would do really well if we all had some meditation going on every day. But just notice what you say to yourself. And there are so many other things you could do, but I think you start there. And the flip to that is, once you see it, is to really look at what can you affirm about yourself that doesn't feel false, but that does feel true. And I've just been recently saying, this might sound so silly, but I've been saying, especially during the pandemic, like, I love you, body. I love my body, and my body loves me. Like, just that dialogue back and forth, and finding things you can start to say to replace it. That would come afterwards, but getting that awareness first, I would say, is the first step.
Julie, when I first started following Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, and he said, do not get out of bed until you have a clear intention and an elevated emotion. And I was like, okay. And I spent one morning when I was first doing this, I spent 3 hours there. I would go to I woke up angry, and I would go to thought after thought after thought. I was like, okay, come on back. And I watched those thoughts. I watched those angry thoughts, like one after another after another. And it was amazing to like when you're actually watching them, I'm like, those were probably always there. They were, right? And when I watched them, it was hours and hours of I finally like brought it back, got calm enough, quiet enough that I could actually be like, okay, I can have a clear intention and an elevated emotion. And it just took that much.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that story. I love that it took, I don't love that it took you 3 hours, but it's funny. I had something similar this morning. I woke up scared again, fear. I just felt it. And then I get into like, I'm well. And I was like, no, I still feel, and I, back and forth. And I just this is not my actual meditation I do, but it is a meditation in itself. And it was all about cellular consciousness. And I'm a big Abraham Hicks fan, for those who might be into Abraham. And it was just actually a spiritual practitioner who played it and then talked about it. And I would not get out of bed until I got out of bed, and I was like, I really feel different. I feel like, oh yeah, hello, like my cells have got this, my body, like, we're good. The divine is here. Like, it like totally shifted everything, and it changed my whole morning. So there's something really, I love Joe Dispenza. I love him and I love his work, and it's so powerful. And that's the thing, we do have control over what we're choosing to focus on. You probably couldn't, you had those anger thoughts, but you could choose to shift them, to do something. And that's powerful. And it takes a little time. This is a work in progress. I'll tell you that. This is not like, even, and I've met, and I actually interviewed Joe at the Illuminate Film Festival. And I remember he works on, I think he's doing great in his life, but this is a daily, this is not like you arrive. I think it's a constant way of being. And it gets easier and easier. It does. But I remember him saying something like, I still practice this. Like, I do this too. And I'm like, all right, amen. Good to hear that. I'm glad that seems like you got it. But, I think it's a practice.
Yeah. He's like, I still have to wait a day to respond to those emails that I want to just
Yes.
jump.
He was very, very real. So funny. I have all this footage in my phone that I'm like, I don't know what to do with that, but we'll see. Some good stuff. I love him. He's very genuine and real. And it's user friendly.
Yes, understanding why you're doing what you're doing, why you're moving the breath where you're moving it. I think that for people who like the science, I think that really can help actually with the meditation piece.
Yeah.
Because if you're still thinking meditation is like this woo-woo annoying tool, because I know it took me a really long time to even consider it.
Me too.
And,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it really is completely life-changing, which,
Yeah.
and I think for me, understanding why I would do this and what the benefits are
Yes.
and what other dimensions I can visit.
Yes. Yes. Or, and sometimes, and I'll say this, sometimes not. Like that's one of the things God, it took me a long time too, Megan. I had to do this in my program. I had to do a dissertation on meditation. And I remember my teacher was like, you need this more than anyone I've seen. Like I couldn't sit still. I hated it. And it was actually, that's why I love Insight Timer. It was Insight Timer that helped me. That's why I was like, I'm getting meditations up there, but it's actually today it's changed. I really do well. It doesn't matter, whatever works. So I'm just going to say for me today, I really love the transcendental meditation approach, which is just, to be honest, it's so simple. It's just a mantra. And oftentimes I don't visit any dimension. However, there are moments where I do feel that, or I do feel like I've just gone somewhere more peace, calm. And that moment, it changes the whole day. So, I love it. Like there's no right way to do it. As long as you're not striving and trying to do anything, but I'm with you. It took me a long time. I did not like it. I was like, this sucks. I hate sitting still. I hate being silent. It's terrible. And it changed my life. And I am now trying to do it at night too, because it's that powerful.
Very cool. All right, Julie, thank you so much for today. Tell us what your latest and greatest project is, where to find you, all that good stuff.
Well, first of all, thank you. I just adore you and your energy and what you guys are doing. And I'm honored to be here. And I hope this was impactful. I really do. What I'm really focusing on right now is, I have my new-ish, I guess 2 years is still kind of new, my life designer coach academy. It's a certification program. It's 4 months. It's like the newest baby that I've birthed. I am in love with this girl, as I call her. I teach the whole thing. It's live, it's virtual, it's very boutiquey. You get a lot of experience. I coach everyone in it, but you also get 20-hour practicum of being coached and coaching. And then there's a final. And it's just, I've really gratefully taken some of the best science from heart math and mind body science and appreciative inquiry out of positive psychology, and then woven it with the foundation of coaching. And it's like, I don't know, I still teach at Georgetown and I love it. It's just this program, I'm able to bring in a little more of the chakras and intuition and, what we were talking about earlier. So we have 40 students already that have graduated from all over the world. And if anyone's interested, I love this program, and I run it 3 times a year right now. I'll probably go down to 2 next year, but for now we're doing that and it's working really well. And I can leave the link. It's on my website, but yeah, I feel like I'm training like a cadre of light workers. It's truly how I feel. And I feel like all of what you're doing what I'm doing. And I'm sure people listening in this healing arts are wanting to help people. I just feel like we're all needed right now, like all hands on deck. And so I don't think there can be too many coaches out there. And it's interesting, a lot of coaches that have already been trained that were kind of felt like they wanted to refine their skills, but also those that haven't been. So that it feels like for right now, that's a way to add some light to this planet. And, I'm getting to talk to you and just other amazing spiritual entrepreneurs. It's like, what a gift.
Yes, please. Thank you. I'm so excited for what you're doing. And I agree. We could not have too many at this point. We need all the people who are ready to step up, because also going through a coaching program, you're upgrading, you're up leveling yourself every time, right? Every time you coach, same thing. So,
yeah.
The more coaches we have, the more people are
Yeah.
doing that same thing for themselves and their family as well.
100%. Oh yeah.
All right. Thanks so much, Julie.
Thank you. And I appreciate all that you're doing in the world and the light you're spreading. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming out to hang with us on the podcast. It is our goal to transform the way women are treated in healthcare. And we need your help. We need your help to get the word out. We have a lofty goal of 1 million downloads. And we know that as this podcast grows, we're going to be able to reach more women, get more amazing speakers for you, and bring the most cutting edge information.
If you found these podclasses helpful, please take a moment to text 5 women you know the link to the series. We appreciate your help so much. Can't wait to see you next time.